Hi everybody, Ian Bremmer here, and a quick take to kick off your week. The latest on Iran. We've seen all of these small scale, in the context of the war, attacks, the U.S. against the Iranians against ships in the Strait, and some attacks by the Iranians on U.S. base in Kuwait. But all of these are constrained. The Iranians have been continuing to engage in negotiations. The Americans are saying that the ceasefire is still holding. There's been a temporary suspension of messages between Iran and the U.S. by the Iranian side just recently, just today, because of the end of the ceasefire and all the fighting that we're seeing between Israel and Lebanon, but that's not going to disrupt this either. It's because they weren't planning on an agreement today. I think that we are still closer than at any point we have been to getting an end to the disruption of the Strait. And this is the biggest problem for everyone around the world. It's not about the nuclear file. It's not about the ballistic missiles. It's not about the Islamic Republic and their regime. It is about not being able to get goods, and particularly oil and gas and derivatives, through the Strait of Hormuz, which was not a problem before the war and now is one. And the deal that we are talking about, that's about all it does. It would also get the Iranians some cash, unfreezing some $7 billion, $6 billion in Iranian assets in Qatar. But the Americans are saying they have nothing to do with that. It's merely coincidental. That is, of course, not really true. But it is the money that will be required if the Iranians are going to stop taking tolls, because they are going to need to get paid off for allowing goods through. They also do want the blockade over, and they want the blockade over because it is costing their economy, but it's costing every economy. And we should really take note here. This war has been going on for over 3 months now. And while I've seen bigger foreign policy mistakes made by American presidents, the war in Iraq was thousands and thousands of Americans dead, and massive, massive costs in terms of the fighting of the war over many years. I've never seen a decision that taken by a U.S. president that has had such a negative impact in such a short period of time as Trump's failure in Iran. This is the costs and consequences are massive. And for what? I mean, what is the benefit that is being achieved by the United States? It's not changing the regime. It's not surrender by the Iranians. It's not complete destruction of their military capabilities. It's not ending their ballistic missile capacity. And for now, at least, it's not even the nuclear file. The one thing that we're talking about is getting the Strait reopened, and that was not a problem before the war started. So this is a huge, huge mistake. And when I travel around the world, what's clear is that almost every world leader strongly opposes this war, because of the costs and the consequences it has for them themselves. I was in the Dominican Republic briefly last week with all the CEOs there, and I spent a bunch of time with the president, who I think is a pretty solid citizen, actually. And his popularity has shrunk down to 55% from the 60s, on the back of inflation, which has nothing to do with the acts that his government has taken. It's about President Trump going to war in Iran. And this is true in Europe, it's true in Asia, it's true in sub-Saharan Africa. I mean, almost every country around the world you look at is suffering directly as a consequence of this rash, reckless, and failed decision. And, you know, people say that the Republicans are still supporting the war in the United States, and that is true. Some 70% supports the war when asked of those that have voted and identify as GOP. But that has very little to do with the war. That's just that 70% of Republicans support President Trump, no matter what he says or does on any given issue, because they view that political loyalty is more important, and expressing it and being aligned with it is more important than the impact of any individual policy. So it has very little to do with Iran. But leaving aside that the war is quite unpopular in the United States, including among independents overwhelmingly, and of course Democrats overwhelmingly, it's also incredibly unpopular among everyone else around the world. It's becoming unpopular even in Israel because it looks pretty clear that this war is not going to end with the Israelis having defeated Iran the way they've defeated Hezbollah or defeated Hamas. And so Bibi Netanyahu's approval ratings are dropping substantially on the back of this war. And that's to say nothing of all the countries across the extended Middle East or everyone else. So, if it's only 20 to 30% of Americans that support the war, it's about maybe 1 or 2% of the global population that does. And that is what's really meaningful. Not even the Iranians, and that is because the Iranian people who had hoped they were going to be rescued, as President Trump said he was going to do at the beginning of the war, now seems very clear that they're the ones that are going to suffer the most greatly, as probably should have been clear from day one. Okay, is there anything really positive we can say? And the answer is yes. It is that long term, we're seeing the end of OPEC. And OPEC is an oil cartel that ensures that profits, significant profits, are going to the countries that are producing and exporting the oil, and that there isn't effective competition among them. There's no free market, and that means much less efficiency in a globalized market. So the end of OPEC is clearly a positive for the world. And more importantly, when everyone sees how easy it is for a small number of committed individuals with drones that are cheap and easy to make can disrupt the Strait of Hormuz, the same thing is true for the Red Sea, the same thing is true for the Strait of Malacca. And that means that long term, your commitment to oil and gas really needs to reduce. It's a 20th century technology. The prices aren't going down as technology improves. You're much better off shifting to electric vehicles, as we see the world doing much faster now, and advanced battery technology and solar and wind and nuclear and all of those things. And, frankly, in 5 years' time, we'll look back and see that President Trump has done more through the war in Iran to advance a transition to a post-carbon energy agenda than any American president in history. And that really is a good thing for the world. I mean, the Chinese are much better positioned for it right now than the Americans are. But surely, as we've seen with semiconductors and critical minerals, as the Chinese really press that advantage globally, the Americans will eventually get the joke and pick it up. This may not be Trump's intention in launching the war, certainly wasn't, but nonetheless is a consequence, and one that we can all celebrate. Got to look for the silver linings. Anyway, that's it for me. I'll talk to you all real soon.